what it does, and I don't hear any difference in the sound. Can you please help explain what the phase button does? Yes. It's funny. You know, a lot of us, of course, know what that is, and I would say most people don't have a clue what a phase button is. One of the reasons we don't know is because it's actually mislabeled. It really should be called a polarity button. But let's say that we called it a polarity button. You probably still don't know what that means. And it is the absolute polarity between plus and minus on your speakers that's changing, okay? So on the back of the speaker, we've got a red terminal and a black terminal. And we kind of always want to match the red of our amplifier through a wire to the red of our speaker. That keeps it in phase or in the proper polarity. And the black goes to the black, right? So what that means is, at the beginning of something that is playing in a phase correct or a polarity correct system, when the initial attack happens, it pushes the driver forward and then it comes back. As opposed to if it were out of polarity or out of phase, at the first instant that speaker started moving to make sound, it would go back and then forward. Years ago, there was a fellow, George, I can't remember George's last name, but he was called the Polarity Pundit. And interesting guy, he would just rail and rave about the importance of polarity. And that most people's problems in their system was improper polarity, that a lot of recordings are made out of proper polarity, proper phase, and that button's important to change it. And I am not sure I completely agree with it. I understand the thinking process, and I understand that many of us have heard a difference in polarity or phase, but I think we rapidly get used to any difference like that, and then over time, here's an example. One of the things that I do when I talk about whether something has a meaningful change or not, whether it's an amplifier, circuit difference, or whatever we've done, a cable, I should be able to walk into a room and listen to, if I know the room, and walk into and go, something's changed. Somebody did something. We got the wrong cable on here, we did this. Somebody's done something, and I can hear it. And maybe I haven't been there for a week, but I hear it. And I know something has been changed, and then I'll track it down, and sure enough, it's been changed. I've made the experiment of having somebody with just swap polarity and see if I hear it, and I don't. I walk into the room, I couldn't tell you if the polarity is in or out. I think I can tell if I push it in or out in a live situation, but that's not enough to make it worth your while. So to sum up, basically that phase switch on the back is swapping the red and the black terminals on your speaker, not literally on your speaker, but that's what's effectively happening, like that. So that black goes to red and red goes to black, and then you put it in phase and red goes to red, black goes to black. And I don't think it's all that important. So, okay? One last thing. If the left channel's in phase and the right channel's out of phase, you got trouble right here in River City, because that's called, out of phase. You're going to have cancellation. So whatever phase or polarity you have, make sure it's the same on the left and the right, which your switch will do. So, all right? Thanks for the question. I'll talk to you all later. Bye-bye.
Alright, in this video, I'm going to teach you as quickly as I can how to read notes on a page. So first, here's a piece of music. We have the title at the top, the composer in the upper right hand corner, and the music below. All these dots with
Hi, welcome to Piano TV. My name's Alicia. I'm your piano playing host. And today we're going to have a little bit of a chat about memorization, which is a super important thing to do if you're a musician, because you want to be able to be mobile with your skills. So if you're at the music store and you're with your friends, you can like just sit down and be like, hey friends, check out this sweet song. Or if you're at your grandma's house, you can be like, hey grandma, listen to this, without having to pour it around all your music. So sometimes people have a really easy time memorizing pieces, and sometimes people really struggle. So I'm going to share some suggestions, and we're going to talk about the 4 aspects of memorization as well. Let's get started. The first area of memorization that we're going to talk about is tactile memory. So tactile is like touch. It's like actual physical memory. I like to call it finger memory, even though obviously your fingers don't have memory. But this is what happens when you play something over and over and over again, and eventually your fingers just sort of memorize the pattern, and without much thought on your part, your fingers just sort of do what you need them to do. So in order to develop tactile memory, it's really, really important that every time you play through something, you use the exact same finger patterns, otherwise it's just not going to stick. Now, tactile memory on its own isn't a reliable memorization technique because it tends to be the first part of your memory that slips. But it is really good in conjunction with other aspects that we'll talk about. Another aspect of memorization is oral memory. Oral is an A-U-R-A-L, as in you're listening. So you know when you're just sitting there and you have a song stuck in your head and you're like, I don't know, grooving out to the song, or maybe you're like, get this song out of my head. You need to know the piece that you're learning, that you're trying to memorize, well enough that you could get it stuck in your head. You need to be able to just sit down and listen through it without any audio assistance. You should be able to listen to it start to finish in your head. If you can't do that, what you need to do is work on developing your oral memory of that song. So that might involve just listening to it lots, maybe following along the score while you do, because lots of pop songs that you get stuck in your head, you've probably heard like a dozen times, or more. So you want to kind of take the same approach. Listen to your piece a lot. Really give yourself immersion, and that'll get it in your head. Another thing that you can do is learn how to sing the melody of your piece. Even if it's an instrumental piece, you can still learn the melody. Even if it's just like simple little right hand notes, that still counts, and that'll give you a sense of beginning, middle, and end with your piece, and it'll allow you to hear it in your head a little bit easier. Next, we have visual memory, and this can work in a couple different ways. So to develop visual memory, this would be your ability to close your eyes and imagine which keys on the keyboard that you play throughout your piece, just to visualize yourself pressing the keys. And that's very important, as well as being able to close your eyes and imagine the score, imagine which notes you're playing throughout the entire piece. Developing a visual memory, to me, is the hardest part. I have a really hard time closing my eyes and imagining myself press the keys. It's really tough. I'm sure it comes more naturally to some people, but this is where I really have to work. But I notice a huge difference when I do in terms of security, and I'm much less likely to have memory lapses when I practice. The fourth and last aspect of memory is analytical memory, and this is the one that I think is most important to implement right when you're learning a brand new piece. So what analytical memory, it's basically just analyzing a piece before you begin learning it. So instead of sitting down to a piece of music and seeing it as just this endless stream of notes with no sense or order, it's important to see the order in it to find it. So that includes looking through a piece and finding the structure. So which parts are the same, which parts are different, finding patterns with the song structure, as well as looking at more of the minute details, like if there's any rhythmic patterns, any melodic patterns. You want to look and see what chords are used, if there are chords, what the key of the piece is, what the key signature is, All of these things will give you a really good understanding of the piece, and having a good understanding of a piece will just make memorizing it so much easier. So I'm just going to give a few extra pointers for working on memory and talk about some problems I've seen a lot in my years of teaching with memory and trouble memorizing pieces. So one thing that I find happens a lot is a person will have a false start. So what that means is in the first maybe 5 seconds or so, they start a piece but they kind of lose it. Maybe they started on the wrong note, or they don't have a sense of the right rhythm, and you end up with a performance where it takes like a few passes to get past that initial beginning and get into the song. So a few things you can do to prevent this kind of thing from happening is just having your memory of the first 5 seconds of the piece so locked down that you could do it in your sleep. And that's having a mental image of where your fingers start, even taking a few seconds on the bench before you start to get the song in your head, listen to the piece, listen to the rhythm in your head, just so you're not starting and you're like, oh wait, how does my song go again? It just kind of makes it more comfortable. And once you get through those first 5 seconds or so, it's so much easier to just settle into it. It's just, yeah, there's false starts, very common, very common. So work on those beginnings. Another thing that happens is the right hand usually ends up carrying the melody in piano. So what that means is that often the left hand is doing accompaniment, but it also means the left hand is less memorable sometimes, and the left hand memory can slip. So in order to make sure that your memory of the left hand notes are really secure, I find it good to memorize it just left hand separately, which is quite hard. If you memorize the song hands together and then try to go memorize it left hand, it can be a bit of a challenge. But this will end up making your left hand memory so much more secure. One thing that can happen when you're learning a piece is there might be 2 sections or more that are almost identical except for maybe like 1 or 2 minor differences. That can be a beast to memorize. Like if they were exactly the same, it'd be easy, right? But those minor variances can be tough. So once you've mastered each section on their own, one way to make sure your memory is secure and you're gonna make the changes in the right part is to play them back to back, and that'll really in the order that they're going to be played, and that'll really work on that memory. And you're gonna make the changes in the right part. You're going to be played, and that'll really. And I do this all the time, is to create reference points throughout your piece that you can just pick up and play from. So what I find happens a lot, as an example, is I'll have a student who starts a piece, it's going well, maybe they get to the 3rd or 4th line and make a mistake, and then they have to go all the way back to the beginning in order to be able to play it. And that's super inefficient from a time standpoint. And if you're in a performance setting, it's really awkward to spend 30 seconds playing and then jump back and do that exact same 30 seconds again. So what I like to do is create little reference points throughout the piece where you can just pick it up from. And depending on the piece, this might be every line or 2. And practice starting from these different points in the piece until it becomes easy. Because then what happens, say you're playing through, you're like 2 minutes into a piece but you make a little slip, you can jump back to one of your reference points or jump forward to one of your reference points, but it's not going to be a big deal because you're not making you don't have to start back like 2 pages prior or something like that. So little memory reference points makes a huge difference. So that is all for today's video on memorization. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope this will help you, go and memorize your pieces more easily. Please leave comments if you have any suggestions or any techniques that have really helped you or anything like that. And thanks for watching. Be sure to visit the website pianistv.net and stay up to date by subscribing. Thanks, bye. I just recorded a whole Hi, welcome.
Si vous apprenez le piano sur YouTube, vous avez sans doute déjà cherché des tutoriels pour apprendre à jouer des morceaux. Donc vous arrivez à apprendre ces morceaux, tout va bien, vous arrivez à les jouer, mais au bout d'un moment, ces morceaux, vous les oubliez. Donc vous cherchez de nouveaux morceaux à apprendre et ainsi de suite, et au final, vous ne développez jamais de vrai répertoire de jeu. Du coup, quand vient le moment de jouer devant vos proches, votre copain, copine, peu importe, vous n'avez pas grand chose sous la main et c'est rapidement la panne sèche. Ce phénomène est totalement normal et touche beaucoup de pianistes qui n'arrivent pas à mémoriser ce qu'ils apprennent. J'ai moi-même eu ce souci quand j'ai commencé. Au début, j'apprenais énormément de morceaux à la chaîne, et puis au final, je ne les mémorisais jamais et je ne me rappelais que des 3 ou 4 derniers que j'avais appris. Bref, si c'est votre cas à vous aussi, on va voir dans cette vidéo une méthode pour apprendre vos morceaux et les mémoriser pour toujours, ou en tout cas le plus longtemps possible. Dans cette vidéo, on va se concentrer principalement sur la mémorisation de suites d'accords. Si le concept vous plaît, dites-le moi en commentaire, et je ferai peut-être un épisode 2 pour mémoriser les mélodies. Allez, sans plus de transition, on regarde tout ça au piano.
L'exercice que l'on va voir pour se rappeler de toutes les suites d'accords que vous apprenez est un exercice de décomposition des accords. Autrement dit, on va s'amuser avec les différentes notes présentes dans les accords, ce qui nous aidera à internaliser les accords et à les mémoriser. Pour l'exemple, on va appliquer cet exercice par-dessus une suite d'accords 1, 6, 2, 5 en Do majeur. Pas de panique si vous ne savez pas ce que c'est, je vous montre les accords. On a ce premier accord, Do Maj 7 pendant 4 mesures. La mineur 7 pendant 4 mesures. Ré mineur 7 et Sol 7. Je vais utiliser ces accords pour l'exemple, mais vous pouvez bien sûr utiliser des accords de votre choix, par exemple dans le morceau que vous voulez mémoriser. Ça marche avec n'importe quelle suite d'accords. Pour le premier exercice, on va jouer les accords à la main gauche et décomposer les notes à la main droite en montant les notes. On va jouer les accords en début de mesure, puis les notes une par une sur chaque temps. Ça donnera ça. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Je vais mettre un métronome à 70 battements par minute pour tout l'exercice. Vous pouvez bien évidemment adapter le tempo à la vitesse à laquelle vous êtes le plus à l'aise. Donc ça, c'était le premier exercice qui vous aidera énormément à internaliser les accords. Ça vous fait repenser à l'accord que vous jouez à chaque fois, et c'est bien plus efficace que de simplement jouer les accords. Une fois que vous arrivez facilement à cet exercice, on va le tourner différemment et faire la même chose en descendant les notes à la main droite. Toujours avec le métronome, ça donnera ça. Une fois que vous maîtrisez ces deux exercices sur les accords que vous souhaitez mémoriser, vous pouvez passer au dernier exercice. Celui-ci est plus complexe, mais c'est le plus efficace. Si vous le répétez encore et encore, il vous permettra de vous souvenir de vos suites d'accords pour toujours. Ce qu'on va faire, c'est principalement d'improviser sur les notes des accords. Alors ça peut faire peur, mais en fait, on va juste faire ce que l'on a fait avant, seulement on n'a pas de structure montante ou descendante. On joue juste les notes au hasard. On va garder une note par temps et essayer de jouer la note suivante la plus proche. est cool avec cet exercice, c'est qu'il est toujours différent. Vous ne pouvez pas simplement retenir l'ordre des notes, vous devez y penser différemment à chaque fois. Et ça permet à votre cerveau de visualiser ces notes de plein de perspectives différentes, les rendant quasi impossibles à oublier. Vous pouvez appliquer cet exercice sur la suite d'accords de votre choix, ça vous aide non seulement à mémoriser les accords, mais ça vous apprend également à improviser par-dessus les accords. D'ailleurs, si vous souhaitez travailler l'improvisation, vous pouvez rejoindre ma formation gratuite d'improvisation pour les débutants en cliquant sur le lien dans la description. Si la vidéo vous a plu et que vous voulez soutenir mon travail, mettez un like et un commentaire. C'est pour ça que YouTube sait quelles sont les vidéos de qualité et lui permet de recommander la chaîne à d'autres pianistes. Donc voilà, c'est une toute petite action que vous pouvez faire qui m'aide beaucoup. Merci d'avance et je vous dis à la prochaine.
Bonjour, voici Katia Keller et aujourd'hui je vais vous parler d'une petite technique, mais une technique très puissante en fait pour la mémorisation. Mais c'est cette partie de la mémorisation, il s'agit des morceaux qu'on a déjà mémorisés, qu'on a déjà appris à jouer et on les joue, mais si on ne répète pas ce morceau tous les jours, si on laisse du côté ce morceau, dans un mois ou 2 mois, on revient et du coup, il y a des parties de morceaux. Bon, le corps se souvient de ce morceau, mais il y a du coup d'autres parties où j'ai aucune idée de ce qui se passe là. Parce que à l'époque, je me suis vraiment appuyée sur la mémoire motrice, la mémoire de mon corps. Et comment est-ce qu'on peut travailler ces lacunes, on peut dire. Parce que pour chaque morceau que vous avez mémorisé, il y a forcément quelques notes dont vous vous souvenez